be all hot. I don't think Jim have enough copies for it.
Oh, yeah.
We are streaming. Difficult to not stream.
These are,
Yes.
yeah,
Just had it financial.
we're,
Alicia?
we didn't have a forum
I
for the
haven't seen
financial
her
committee
yet.
until just now, so,
Oh, it's
Right.
Kyle.
it makes sense
You're going
to.
to put enough. Well, I don't want to,
Like,
I can move on.
3-minute financial committee meeting or just. I don't know.
Like
What's
this
their
way.
agenda though, Mike? I didn't see. The only thing really is some more of these things pass around. I said earlier today that, there's a proposal that George Wilhelm had put together. It's related to the short-term, it's the cash management for the library. I don't know if you had a chance to look at that. It was. No, that one's not in the packet, but it was, so what, we're streaming, right?
We are, I could make more copies of that proposal.
Let's just, I mean, it's almost time for the real meeting, so we can, if you want to call this briefly, a finance committee meeting for the next 3 minutes or whatever until
We are,
time for,
we have a forum.
yeah. So the only, it's something I wanted to raise. It's something that George Wilhelm had put together as basically a recommendation for the library for cash management. And his proposal kind of explains it in more detail, but just to give like a very brief summary of my understanding, the idea is that right now we've got, when we get our tax levy, we're investing it in, in either treasury bills or CDs and with varying maturities, and then we're taking monies coming out every month to cover our expenses. But that's very, it's in, very rough amounts. We're getting, several $100,000 coming out to cover that month's expenses, but we, it means we end up with extra money sitting in the operating account that is really not earning any interest. And with interest rates higher and an opportunity to really be, earning on it, we're kind of foregoing interest we could be earning. And so there's an investment vehicle that's specifically for New York public entities that are governed by the municipal law for their investment. But it allows you to do it's designed for this exact purpose for cash management. You can move your money in and out of it. It's fully liquid, so you can move your money in and out of it, get a higher interest rate than you would be getting just to have it there. And it would just be a little bit more on the administrative burden side because, someone at the library would have to be, when we have check runs, they'd have to be, and when we have payroll, they'd have to be planning, a day in advance or whatever to do the cash transfer so the money would come across and be there in the account to be paid out. And then any excess funds over some certain buffer amount, just for, to have some money in there, would get transferred back in. And then the idea is that, it's with, interest rates where they are, this could be, maybe even, $10,000 in a year, worth of interest that we're just not getting right now because it's sitting in the operating account earning almost nothing. Okay. So, the idea would be is he wanted to bring that to the board and it's not totally clear to me if that's something that requires a board vote to do, but it may, it's a new investment vehicle that we haven't approved previously, so we may need a vote on that. But I wanted to raise that, and when the finance committee members have a chance, look at the kind of written proposal from that George put together, and then we can kind of discuss that going forward. So move
Not on
forward.
tonight's agenda.
Not on tonight's agenda, but this is just kind of bringing it up, putting it on the table so we can consider that, because it does look like we are potentially leaving money on the table, you
No
know.
minimum balance required.
I
You don't have to be.
I don't know the detail. I don't want to speak to that.
It's
because
like
I'm
a
not sure.
specialized cast man.
It's, this particular one is specifically designed for
What we do.
what we write. It's only, my understanding is only kind of public entities that are governed by the municipal law, like libraries and school districts and other, you know, things like that are eligible for this particular vehicle, but yeah, so if we can, you know, take a look at that and, you know, if we need to get answers from George or investigate further and kind of see what we want to do with that. That's the only specific thing on the agenda for the finance committee. We're gonna have the budget is on the agenda for the main board meeting. But unless anybody has anything else, we'll wrap up this committee meeting. All right. All right, finance committee meeting adjourned.
Okay. I have 6:02. I will call the meeting to order at 6:02 p.m. Everyone please rise for the pledge.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation,
Under God.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. First order of business is the approval of the minutes from February 16th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved, Barbara.
Okay. Do I have a second? I'll second. Okay, is there any discussion? Right, all in favor of approving the minutes from February 16th, 2023, please signify by raising your hand or saying aye. Aye. Is anyone opposed? Okay, passes unanimously at 6:03. All right, is there anyone for public input this evening? No public input to report right now. Okay. So we move to personnel actions. Okay,
So the ones in the board packet have been slightly modified. I don't know if you've got seen one. I think it's acceptable. I
Thank you.
think. Oh, there you go.
you want, all right. So the personnel actions are to approve the promotions of Quinn Chan, full-time library clerk to full-time senior library clerk in the Circulation and Collection Services Department effective March 2nd, 2023. And the promotion of Alice Van Cleve, full-time library clerk, to full-time senior library clerk in the Circulation and Collection Services Department effective March 7th, 2023. And to approve the appointment of Lindsay Fox, part-time library page in the Circulation and Collection Services Department effective March 8th, 2023. Do I have a motion to approve these personnel actions? Alish?
Got a question from Barbara.
Okay, can we have a second and then we'll have discussion? Mike, okay, discussion. Barbara?
I just have a quick question. Is the promotion as a result of like a civil service exam or a consolidation, or just a little explanation of, you know, why the jump?
I'm gonna have to count on you and or Sarah for that now. So,
It was a vacancy we had that we were waiting to fill until negotiations were open or until negotiations were closed. So once we close that, we were able to hire all the vacancies.
So both,
Just as a follow-up, I know when we do the negotiations, there was one vacancy that we had agreed to leave off, so it's not that one, right? It was-
Correct.
correct,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, great, thank you.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Any more questions? Hearing none. All in favor of approving these personnel actions as so stated, please signify by raising your hand or saying aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? Hearing no opposition, it passes unanimously at 6:06. Okay, the next order of business is the treasurer's report for February 2023. And we have that. So do we have anyone to talk about the treasurer's report?
Well, as the director, I can say that I reviewed the treasurer's report and found no concerns with George's report.
So we can-
Also reviewed by David Guilderland. I asked him if he'd like.
Any comments on the treasurer's report? Any comments from any board members on the treasurer's? Check register now. Check register. Oh, I have it over here. Okay. All right, does anyone want to speak to the, check register for February 14th, 2023 to March 13th, 2023?
I'll basically say the same thing, which is that, you know, in the normal process of reviewing the checks, I don't see anything unusual happening from my perspective.
Anyone else have any questions about this check register? You need a motion to approve it. Do I have a motion to approve the check register for February 14th, 2023 to March 13th, 2023? Check. Is there a second? I'll second. All right. No, we didn't have a detailed analysis of it, but Tim says that he has reviewed it and there is nothing unusual about it. So are there any questions about the check register or any comments from the board? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the check register for that time period, please signify by raising your hand and saying aye. Aye. Is there anyone opposed? Okay. Okay. Now we are at the directors and department heads monthly reports.
Okay, thank you. First thing I'll say is I'm a little bit sick, but it's not COVID, so I might lose my voice a little bit, but hey. Second thing I'll say is that Vanessa is working on getting logged in. We had to change the meeting link at the last minute due to a technical thing. So Vanessa is, working on connecting to the meeting. Big thing that happened in February is that our final $250,000 check from DASNY for the SAM grant related to the renovation and expansion that Pat Fahey sponsored was received and deposited. So all grant-related paperwork is done, which is a great achievement. I want to thank both David Gilliam and Tim Riley for a lot of due diligence related to that stuff. And also I want to thank David for just ably stepping into the vacancy with our vacant fiscal officer position for the third time in his 8 years here. He's carrying the ball during the interim time between one fiscal officer and the next. I also want to thank the board for allowing that 1 hour early closure for a holiday party on February 10th. We had 54 staff and family members in attendance, and it was very successful. I don't have the details, but just to let you know, there's an upcoming time when we're going to stay open an hour or an hour and a half later to accommodate a program that we're doing. So, you know, come see, come saw. The New York State annual report to the State Education Department has been completed 1 day late, which is, you know, we would have loved to have completed it 1 day earlier, but really every department head here contributed to getting that done. It was headed up by Natalie, and it's been a significant pressure on David Gilliam's time in the last couple of weeks as he's one person in a two-person office. But we're done, and that's great. So Natalie, Lisa, Lauren, and Sarah have been working hard on the merger of the two departments, Access Services and Collection Services Department. That's been time consuming, but everyone's doing a great job. We have a new-ish within the last year safety committee, which has a diverse membership throughout the library, and they are also working very hard in a new building to establish new procedures and so forth. In the Public Information Department, we had a great exhibit during February from a local painter named Bryn Marion, a young woman who graduated from Guilderland High School. And also a major thing that happened in February was that we launched our new event management software on the website. It's called unimaginatively Library Calendar. This is a product that we licensed, but it's really a lot better than the previous system that we used called eVanced, and allows library patrons to be much more interactive with the registering themselves and also booking meeting rooms for themselves if they wish. And again, that was the PPS department, the Public Information Officer, the IT department, and the admin group. Too many people to thank there. Luann does have her email open rate up to 56%. The average is 33, so we're getting close to double the national average. So good job. The HR department, Sarah's been very, very busy with the reorganization, the administrative contracts, the search for a fiscal officer. And if you look at her report, she has a list of 13, obviously she doesn't use names, but a list of 13 employee matters that were brought to her attention in the month of February. I don't want to name them all, but how to deal with significant illness, short-term disability, Family Medical Leave Act, and leadership skills and training. She's hit the ground running, doing an excellent job so far. If you look at the circulation Access Services Department, first of all, this should be the last month in which you get separate reports for Access Services and for Collection Services, because we merged those departments. But at the top of that report, it indicates that several categories of circulation are down about 5%. So I checked in on that this afternoon. That's down from the previous month, and really the reason for it is that January has 3 more days than February, so it's really not a concern. If you look at the bar chart underneath it, the year-over-year circulation is significantly up, so that's a good sign. All those people involved in managing the merger of those two departments have done it with 3 full-time clerk vacancies at the same time. So it's been hard work, and I want to thank them all. And again, there's too many people to name. Programming department is going full steam ahead with both in-person and virtual programs and some hybrid. And we are offering the AARP tax aid program again for the first time since 2019. Maria Buell, Dennis Schmatsky, and the IT department all had a lot of work to do to make that happen. So I thank them. It is more limited than it has been in previous years. They used to prepare tax returns for people on Saturdays and Mondays, and now they only do Mondays because they don't have enough volunteers. So hopefully as society gets back to the new normal, they'll be able to expand again next year. There was a great 5-part series of programs on transformative journaling led by librarian Jocelyn Wilder. And in this day and age, just getting 15 or 20 people to commit to 5 meetings over the course of a month or two on anything is really kind of impressive. But it shows how much interest there is in writing and creative subject matter for programming. The Youth Services Department in February had a busy week of February break programs, and then 2 of those librarians, Elizabeth Smith and Emily Viscuso, published their 3rd Decide Your Destiny interactive software event on our website. It's really very cool. Brianna Wakowitz, our teen librarian, has restarted the Teen Advisory Council from prior to COVID. And the students at the high school have named themselves the TACOs, Teen Advisory for Community Outreach. There's a similar group for the middle school, but they have not come up with a name yet. The story times offered by Elizabeth Smith, Amy McCarthy, and Maura Powers Smith are going very, very well. Kind of a cool thing to point out, Michelle Boytel is a full-time library clerk in the circulation department, but she's also interning in the PPS department as she finishes up her library degree at the University of Buffalo. So I know from some of the conversations I've had with some board members that there's an interest in continuing education, and so I just thought I would mention that. The IT department obviously was very involved with this new library calendar software and also with standardizing our work order ticketing systems throughout the building. We were using 3, we're now using 1, which will be much more efficient. And then future thing to tell you about, on March 23rd, we have a patron, a very dedicated library patron, as Sean calls him in his report, Dr. John Hargraves, who's convening a meeting here of the Hearing Loss Association of America Capital Region chapter to show the people that are active in that group how our new assisted listening technologies, of which we have 3, can be accessed in the Helderberg, the Westbrook meeting room, and the children's programming room. So that'll be an interesting and exciting program. There's a foundation meeting that night, so I'll be bopping between those 2 events. But so far, all that technology is working well. And I want to thank Natalie for that, and Sean and his guys, because they've done a lot of the implementation. But when we did implement it, Natalie was working at UHLS and was able to find some funding that helped us. I think it was a couple $1,000s of funding. And also, because we did that in our renovation, she then launched a program where other Capital Region libraries could also get a couple $1,000s to make that happen. So good work over there, Natalie. And that is my report.
Okay, thanks, Tim.
You bet.
So we're moving on to committee reports. Building and grounds.
All right. I do want to mention, it's not technically part of my committee, but I did come to a listening tour last Wednesday, which I definitely highly recommend to any board members. It was really insightful to see just people working day to day and on what they were doing. And I want to thank everybody that walked me around. I know Lisa did a tour and helped, kind of show me around areas of the library I hadn't seen. And I got to learn a little bit more about the different things that were going on here at the library on the ground level. So I do want to say I appreciate that. I spent about 4 hours here on that Wednesday. So I got to learn a lot, and Sarah helped me, get to meet all the folks. I brought some snacks, so it was cool. I got to meet a lot of people I wouldn't have probably met otherwise. I plan on coming one more day for an evening visit to meet the evening staff next week. So I do want to do a shout out there. And I've been coming to a lot of the programs, so I highly recommend that if you haven't been to one yet. The programs here are super great. My son loves the Lego one the most. In terms of building and grounds updates, the construction for the cafe is moving along. It's been, a little bit of back and forth, but pretty much the last thing we have remaining is the millworks. We're having to rework the counter It was installed a little too low, so we are putting it in higher. So that it is more functional. I've been coordinating with, between Megan and Melanie to get all the stuff in place. We're still estimating a couple more weeks before we can open, but we are looking pretty good. All the electrical and plumbing has been done, and the hand washing sink's been installed. And if you peek in through the window, you can see how far it's come from just a couple weeks ago where it was still mostly a storage. So, so that's going pretty well, and that's pretty much it for the update. Did I miss anything? No. Breakdown this morning. Okay.
There were three components: plumbing, electrical, and carpentry millwork. And electrical probably wrapped up today, but if not today, tomorrow. Plumbing is done, and then just the millwork was done, but then needs to have some tweaks, you know.
Mhm.
And we're still within budget on that.
And the counter was moved already, right?
Right,
I believe. Okay. So that's all good to go. So we haven't had a meeting because we haven't needed one, but we probably need one this month coming up. So if you're on the committee, just keep an eye out. We'll probably have a doodle poll out.
I guess the one other thing I'd say about the electricity is that the work that was done in the cafe room and probably got finished today was part of, there are also about 50 lights that still need to be changed in the circulation area and the front lobby that were not available for the longest time, but they came in, and that's the same electrician that is probably going to be here tomorrow starting on that.
So there will be some stuff to go over that will warrant a meeting probably. So I'll be calling one of those. I will say that when I was here walking around that Wednesday, I did just talk to patrons while I was here too. And this one lady says she watches our website every day to get an update on the cafe because that's all she wants is to be able to get a snack while she's here with her kids. So, and a few other people saying they're very excited for the cafe. So I'm excited about that. It's been a long time coming. So that's it for building and grounds.
Sounds good. I'm sure we're all excited about the cafe.
I'm excited for it.
All right, Barbara, long-range planning.
You're muted.
You're muted, Barbara.
Sorry about that.
That's
We
okay.
haven't met since our last meeting, but we will meet within the next couple of weeks.
Okay. Finance. Mike.
Finance committee met very briefly just before this meeting. Just the one thing we very briefly discussed is there's a proposal from our treasurer, George Wilhelm, about a new, I guess, approach to the library's cash management. And so we're basically just in the investigation phase on that. But the idea would be that the library may be able to earn more interest in its operating cash than we are currently. And so we're looking into that. On the agenda is for a vote is the budget, which we presented presented to the board in last month's meeting. That's we're at that point in the meeting.
I guess I have one other update, which, and you may not have seen this, Mike, but right around 5 o'clock, we got the last document for the auditors that they needed in order to be able to close their audit. So they will be closing and issuing the minutes letter tomorrow, which I suppose technically might be a finance committee or an audit committee matter, but there's actually both committees usually have a joint meeting over that and when it comes out. So I'll keep you posted, Mike. So.
Well, I had a couple questions about the budget, but maybe we should do the motion and a second before we have a discussion. Or should we have a discussion first?
I'll make a motion to approve the budget.
Each second. Okay, discussion. I just had a question, and it's, sorry about the late question, but I just noticed that our capital reserves for improvements have been applied as future tax. I didn't really understand that. I guess I just hadn't really thought about it before, but I was just wondering why that, why capital improvements would be applied to tax cert matters?
I think that note is just indicating that this is for essentially the way when we do our budget, that capital reserves line, and it's the kind of balance line where we balance out, it basically, we figure out all our different budget lines in the spend, and we have the amount that we can get through the tax levy, and the kind of excess goes into that, indicating it's for, future expenses and things. So the idea is most of that money is not intended to be spent in the current budget year. It's going to be reserves that we're building up for future purposes, which could be future capital costs, renovations somewhere down the line, things like that. But it also could be unexpected expenses like the tax certiorari thing that, we have been dealing with this year. So I think that was just indicating those are potential future uses for that money. And just to address that, one of the things that there's been a lot of discussion on, last month, Tim Riley specifically brought this up, and but it was something that I and George Wilhelm had already been discussing and talking about, is hopefully for next year, but going forward, we want to have a much more concrete sense of how we're budgeting for these future expenses. Because right now, the process has just been basically, we have the maximum tax levy, we figure out our various budget lines, and whatever's left over gets kind of saved for the future, rather than having a target and saying, in X number of years, we expect to need a major renovation, which may cost X amount of money, and we should be budgeting a certain amount. There are best practices that we can look to that advise libraries and other organizations how much they should be putting, in these reserve type funds. Also, we could have a dedicated fund to cover potential tax certiorari issues, which I guess the school district already does that. And again, it would just require us to, figure out, how much we should be budgeting for that, work that in, and then we wouldn't just be it wouldn't just be whatever's left over, it goes into that. It would be, we're saving a certain targeted amount every year, and then, excess beyond that, we could say, well, that we don't need to take that in the tax levy potentially or whatever. But we're not at that point because we're just talking about trying to get that level of organization and kind of, a little better kind of future planning in our process, but we don't have it yet.
Is that what you would call, like the school budget has a fund balance? Is that what you would call would you designate a fund balance? Like if you have money, if you don't spend all of your the money that you said you were going to spend, and you have some left over, that's usually a fund balance.
Right. Yeah. So that is, that's what happens to this money on that line that doesn't get used. That it just that basically that goes into our fund balance.
Okay, it's just a little bit confusing because it's called capital reserves for improvements. I think that's a very confusing designation, because it looks like it should be just for capital.
I agree. It's a process that I inherited, that the board, prior to their hiring me, was always saving up for a big project. And for the last 2 years in budget development, Mike and I and others have talked about how we're really not saving up. We theoretically could be, but we don't anticipate over the short term any huge need to do capital improvements. So maybe the name of the line, for one thing, should change. So because it does, I don't think it's intentionally misleading. I just think we need to change the name. And then I think what Mike's saying about possible funds for particular purposes, Tim Riley was just starting to look into that, but it's not a simple matter. Like, you have to figure out what the board is allowed to do under ed law, then have the right resolutions written and make the recommendations, either through the finance committee or through the full board. Oh, let's have a tax certiorari fund, or let's have a rainy day fund, or whatever you guys have the power to earmark money in the current year's budget for future needs if you wish. But it seems to me like we need to know more about how that works, or we go changing the name of budget lines.
So we wouldn't be changing the budget lines this budget, or
Well, we don't really have anyone to do the research right now.
right, so Barbara? Yes.
I just had a question that I had raised in the last meeting on line 6,000, the building and equipment cleaning and maintenance. And it was cut, a little over $5,000. And that sort of troubled me a little bit when I was told that most of our maintenance contracts are either up or soon will be up easily within the budget year. So, when you just replace one of those computer boards, you're talking a couple $1,000, and we have a lot of them. So, did anybody investigate that after my question at the last meeting?
Yes,
You know, but-
okay, so, Tim Riley just says that that number is reduced by 6,000 based on the last year worth of expenses. Like, this is the way the expenses are tracking. And he certainly investigated what theoretically could go wrong, but this is his recommendation on the amount of money you need in that line to cover yourself for the upcoming fiscal year. I suppose we could, move it back up to 37,000 and take it out of the capital reserve line, but that's a flexible line anyway, so, I forget that he used the word like expense tracking or something like that.
Yeah, and he also did say that that reduction was in consultation with the department head, that was, so that it was his belief that this was in line with what the actual expenses would be expected to be. So, I'm basing this on what Tim Riley's recommendation was.
I also had, I had asked about the 2.68% increase in the year-to-year budget, and I was told that the finance committee gets that calculation, the tax cap calculation, that it would be under the that even though it's greater than 2%, that the calculation would be that it would be under the 2% cap because of the complicated way it's calculated.
Yeah, and I have not seen the actual calculation. Again, Tim Riley did the calculation. There's a few factors. As I understand it, the main factor, other than just the 2% cap, is there's a growth factor, and that's supposed to account for any new construction or major additions or other things in the town that would grow the tax base that the tax is being applied to. So you can, the actual tax that you're assessing can increase by up to 2%, but because there's more affected property being assessed by that, the effective rate is above 2% because of that growth factor. And so there's some other factors involved as well, but that's the main one. So my understanding is that Tim, plugged those numbers into the calculation provided by the state, and that number, that's the number that came out of that.
Right, I know it can be more than 2%, like an actual number, because I recall that the school, when I was on the school board, they did that calculation, and it was complex. So, I just thought it would just, I was told that the finance committee had that information, but it sounds like maybe you were just.
I don't think we saw the actual calculation that went into it. I think he gave us the number that came out of his, doing the calculation, but I did not see the actual numbers that went into it. I don't believe so.
I did discuss it briefly with David Gilliam, who felt that Tim had the process with the proper due diligence.
Okay.
Is that what you were thinking, Dave?
Yeah, I'd just like to say in the 7 years I've been here, we've always asked for the 2% max, and then whatever the calculation is. I know Carol did the same thing when she was here. It's a complex calculation, but it was always done and then it's presented to the finance committee and then to the board for approval.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I just remember, it was complicated. I know that, Neil Sanders, the business person at the
school board used to always give us that. It was always a lot of numbers. Okay,
I do have,
Albert has a question.
oh, Barbara, oh, sure.
Yeah, just to follow up, at the last board meeting, Tim Riley said that he had based that line's dollar amount on last year's expenditures. And he specifically said he hadn't talked to Lou about what he would anticipate for next year. But Mike, I heard you say, if I'm correct, that you or the finance committee has spoken with Lou between last meeting and this meeting, and he's comfortable with those numbers. So with that assurance, I have no
Well,
problem.
Just, I thought, it was my, and if I'm misremembering, it was my recollection that Tim Riley had said that he had spoken to each of the department heads in putting those numbers together.
He did, definitely, so.
Okay. Okay.
Right, I do have one thing logistically, because if you're approving the budget, I have to mention what's included with regards to when it concerns the personnel committee. Because we did meet on Saturday, and I'm just gonna draw your attention to line 5020. We are still in negotiations with the admin staff, and so that they are requesting an increase in salaries to account for the fact that their salaries are not competitive with the market, which I discussed before when we were doing the union negotiations, but these are non-union admin staff, so they were not included in those negotiations. Their ask, and we talked a lot on Saturday when we met, is about 62,000, and that is just the salary increases. They're willing to not really look at other increases like vacation time and longevity. So that would be the 62 all in. And my understanding is that when this budget was prepared, there was about $60,000 still available from positions that have not been filled, and other items that were less in this budget than they were last year, so that would cover the 60,000 that the admin staff is requesting. We have not started individual negotiations with regards to the people that form this group of admin staff, so we have not agreed to their ask individually, but we wanted to have that 60,000 in there approved in gross, so that would give us a number within which to work for the increases. So I'm not sure that if that needs to be voted on, or if I'm just giving you an update on that.
I'm just curious, like, because the budget ends at, like spends all the money, basically. Where do we get the extra money from? Like, cause I see that it's budgeted, in staff consolidation at 58,420. Right. So where do we get the extra money from in the budget?
From the consolidation from the,
Right, but that's what that number is.
right. So we have 58,000 that from positions that were not filled, and the ask is about 62,000. So I mean, the difference is there, but we haven't started negotiating, so we're just leaving that in the budget so that, and I'm making the board aware that we will be negotiating for increased salaries so that we can bring them up to comparative salaries in the industries, and the money is there. So technically, we will not be asking for anything from any other line items in the budget. I'm just explaining that line item.
Okay.
But my understanding, that's the 62,000 for the covered what the administrator asked, that's already included in this budget.
Correct,
right?
yes.
Okay.
That's
good.
what I'm trying to say.
In
Right.
a balance.
So it's already in there.
In a lot of words. I'm trying to make
Okay.
sense. Yes.
If I can throw in that the original administrative staff ask was 109,000. But without even meeting, they dropped it to 62 in the interest of getting it done, because there's a functional deadline of March 28th to have a final budget number to the state school district, excuse me. So.
The motion is still.
Motion for, to approve the budget. We have a motion and a second. Do we need a roll call vote? And have a roll call vote for the budget.
Probably.
Okay. Alicia,
I'm in.
Corey,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Marcia.
Yes.
Yes.
Mike.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Barbara,
Yes.
Vanessa.
Yes.
Okay, and I'm a yes. So, passes unanimously. Very good. Was there anything else from the finance committee?
No, I don't think, nothing.
That's probably enough for one evening. Okay. Then personnel, we already,
Yeah, no, nothing else right now, although we're
Oh, sorry.
negotiating.
I skipped audit, sorry, Mike.
As Tim Wiles mentioned a few minutes ago, they just got the kind of final piece of information to the auditors earlier today. And so we should finally be getting the completed audit report, I don't know, very soon, I guess. So I'm still waiting on that.
Okay, and then you said there was nothing further from personnel arena, okay, and
We
anything
did
from
not
labor
need-
management?
No,
Okay. Policies, Vanessa?
Hi, everyone. Policy has not met, but I anticipate calling a meeting before our next full board meeting.
Action and board development have not met recently. I'm not sure, COVID action, I mean, we haven't had a meeting in quite some time, which is probably a good thing, but, and probably should schedule a board development meeting sooner than later. Foundation, Marina?
I don't have my notes with me from the last meeting, but I do know that we have 2 new people that volunteered for the foundation, which is really good. They're new to the area and they're very excited to work with the foundation to help the board. Their golf tournament is looking really promising for this year. And I'm sorry, Tim, I didn't bring my notes, but that's all I remember.
That's fine.
And the next meeting on the 23rd.
Yep, this coming Thursday night. The golf tournament is August 28th, and golfers and sponsors are needed. So feel free to encourage your firms and your colleagues to join. It is at Orchard Creek. We rotate it through the golf courses of Guilderland. So this is our first time at Orchard Creek, and that's a Monday. So if you wanted to play golf, you could end up with a 3-day weekend. The foundation also, in the last 2 meetings prior, there was a meeting in February. In the last 2 meetings prior to that, they funded a number of things. And so I came to the foundation with a number of new requests at the February meeting. And they actually didn't discuss any of those requests because they feel that they need to do a little work on their bylaws and mission statement and what their common vision is before they begin funding things again. And I frankly think that's a wonderful idea. The foundation, like most other bodies and organizations, took a hit during COVID, and they're sort of reestablishing themselves. You may have seen the announcements in the library where they're looking for new members. As Narina pointed out, they have 2 new members and they have 3 more people who've expressed interest. So that's a positive sign. And they do meet this coming Thursday night, and I think some progress will probably be made on the bylaws there. That's all I remember.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, UHLS.
I was not able to attend the meeting this month, so I have nothing to report.
Okay, so we're on to old business. So what's new with the formation of the grand opening committee?
Super. Well, I may need some help from Natalie, Sarah, Luann. Yeah, because we discussed this in our department heads meeting, probably about 3 weeks ago now. And my recollection is that we as a group of staff, like, at the last board meeting, it was pointed out, and I think it was a good to go find out what kind of buy-in we could get from the staff for various types of activities. So, and I will invite those 3 people I called on to correct me if I get anything wrong. But I think what we're thinking is that there should be like a 2 to 3, possibly 4-hour event on a Saturday in the spring, once the cafe is open. The focus of this event should be something along the lines of a patron appreciation day. And there should be a little bit of swag, the usual suspects are coffee mugs or pens or something like that, that, you give away to the members of the public. And that I, as the director, and perhaps some board members should be available to just meet the public, like a coffee reception type thing, and basically answer their questions about the renovation and celebrate, the grand, the finish of all that. So basically, as a staff, we think having an elaborate event, like a carnival in the parking lot or something like that, on a weekend is a really, really hard thing to do with 8 staff members inside. So we think it should be, some free coffee in Danish, and, maybe I give a little presentation about the whole process, and, maybe ask for a few board members to be there. That's kind of what we're thinking. We're certainly able to, I think I should put this on the foundation agenda for this coming week. And I'm certainly here to hear what the board says about that concept, if people have thoughts.
So it would no longer be called the grand opening committee, which seemed ridiculous.
Yeah, that's a good point. And that was, I started the discussion with an email, and I think it was Barbara maybe at our last board meeting who had said, kind of the opening on September 21st of 2021, or 28th of 2021, that ship has kind of sailed. So one more thing that didn't happen quite the way you wanted it to during the COVID era, but we'd like to just kind of give something away, whether it's food, beverage, or swag, and thank people.
So would we still need as like a committee, as if we were, with scaling down the event, would we still need a committee for that, or is that
I'm not sure, like if I sent an email
something
to
that y'all need?
the 11 of you, I would imagine 3 or 4 would say, sure, I'll come for an hour, or something like that.
This is basically going to be staff driven with board.
Admin driven.
And driven by you,
Yeah,
and board members would be expected or hopefully would show up. But it's basically for the patrons, run by the staff.
right. Yep.
That's
Maybe a
great.
photo op, so.
Vanessa.
Vanessa,
I was sure that I don't know. I mean, I feel reluctant to give up some sort of grand gesture. I do think the library deserves it. I can appreciate that, enthusiasm for an event like that might be waning. So I offer that maybe we just reconsider over the summer throwing, the new addition of the library or the improvements of birthday party. That could be a fun way to, still have an event, eventually invite people in, celebrate the changes of the library without, ignoring the fact that we're well behind schedule for a grand opening. So just a thought.
That could be incorporated into the patrons appreciation day. You could have a tour of the library.
Yeah, I think it was just scaled back due to resourcing, so without having to call in extra folks, but granted that to be put to the staff, if there's people that can shift to have more coverage on that Saturday, but I don't want to ask that, that's up to them to decide, I guess. And then we'll support whatever.
Right, I think it should be staff driven.
Yeah. So we're here for whatever.
But it might be a little bit more elaborate than
Yeah,
come in here and have a cup of coffee.
there you go. Yeah.
Maybe there's a hot dog involved. I don't know.
Better giving away a book.
Yeah,
Yeah, okay.
Barbara's got.
Barbara?
Yeah, I very much like Vanessa's idea of having like a 1 year anniversary for the grand opening sometime in September. And somebody mentioned hot dogs, and I think, you know, having something out in the parking lot, particularly for the kids, where so much of the emphasis of the new library, you know, was on the children's section. I think, you know, more heads are better than one. I think Vanessa just came up with a really good idea here. That call it a 1 year anniversary for the reopening, and
Although it would be a 2-year anniversary, but yeah.
whatever. But it just involves more people, and particularly, somebody mentioned hot dogs. Kids love hot dogs. They're easy to have somebody on the grill, and you know, have hot dogs, and you can still have your swag, you know, for the adults, and maybe even something for the kids, a bookmark or whatever. But I would like to see something more than just people roaming through the library and saying, you know, having a tour.
Okay. Well, we will go back and discuss that and try to come up with something. I know a couple times people keep mentioning hot dogs. A couple times, just for fun, we put a grill out in front of the library on National Hot Dog Day, which is sometime in June or July, and just gave away free hot dogs. And it would have been fun to have candid camera there. People were like, really? Free? You know? But anyway, and they were sponsored by ShopRite when we did that. So July 19th is National Hot Dog Day. Don't know what day of the week that is. We'll come back to you again next month with more ideas. So.
Okay. Any more discussion of the anniversary of the opening event?
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but I do think, and I don't want to be negative, it's dead, this idea is dead in the water, and we shouldn't drag it because we can't call it grand opening. There's nothing grand about having a coffee and a Danish, and but we can't have an anniversary with a coffee and a Danish. So unless there's staff buy-in, we shouldn't do it, you know, unless there's, you know, a board and fully foundation supported event with no staff buy-in, because that was, you know, they just don't have the resources. So you know, just to say that we're going to move it to next month, and next month we'll talk about it again, and then there's time that lapses, and then we're past the 1-year anniversary, 2-year anniversary. It's just done. I think the staff does a lot of events throughout the year, and they're busy with that, and that's their job. And people love it. So I feel like if there's no buy-in, like let's say me and Alish and Corey and Tony and Marcia will do this, you know, on our own, it's not going to happen. So
I think they were switching it to patron appreciation instead of grand.
right, but even that, a Danish and a coffee is just lame. So I wouldn't do that. But I wouldn't want the patrons to come and say that's what we're doing for them, because it's lame. And they probably expect more. And that was, you know, 2 years ago when we opened. That's just my opinion.
I do want to throw out that it's the 220th anniversary of Guilderland this year. So we've had someone who's been trying to coordinate something with us. But I don't know, I'm just saying that could be a possible angle and have more of a broader kind of view about it, you know.
I think we should allow the staff to tell us what they want to do. The other people are going to be servicing it. You have people inside and people are going to have to work. I think the board should follow the lead of the staff.
Yeah. And if they want us here, I'll be here.
Right.
Let's work.
And I thank you for that. I kind of think there's certainly some logic and reason to what Narina is saying, you know, like if somebody needs to own the fact that the grand opening didn't happen, I'll be happy to own it. Let's move on. We do have lots of big events. So I support that idea, but if I'm if the board asks me to pursue something, I will pursue something.
All right, any more discussion about the grand opening years committee? I don't know what to call it. Any more discussion?
Sounds like we need some more staff input on if we even need a committee, because at this point, it seems if it's gonna be scaled back, we don't need another committee.
At the very least, I'm happy to bring it back to the department heads group and, talk about the discussion we had here for a few minutes and, see if we can find a way to unite the various visions.
Yeah, and I'm still like on the foundation board, they still want to spend money, they still want to do stuff for the library. So if it's gonna be a foundation event, then we can work with them on that end if the board wants to do something and the staff is not available. So if the foundation wants to put something, that could still happen.
I think it's just to add more work for them. I think some of the components that were cool from what we were trying to plan before is like having music, because that doesn't typically involve more staff. We had a band that was willing to play, or like local art authors to come.
Yeah,
Those were things that cost little to no money and would make it seem more
yeah,
exciting or something.
coffee, a Danish, and a band.
So then there you go. But that would hopefully not put an additional burden on staff at that point. So, I don't know.
I will definitely
Good
revisit
ideas.
with my department heads. Update you next month.
All right. Is there any new business?
I just would like to mention that there was an article in the Ed Sunday Times about how reading is taught. I don't know if anyone's read it. It's worthwhile reading. It's how reading is, we want our children to learn to read, but then the way we teach it, it disincentivizes most children from reading anything.
I did read that.
It's a really, I mean, may or may not agree with it, but it's a very interesting article. So
Sunday it was.
Sunday Times, yeah.
They don't read fiction, they
They
read
don't read anything.
a lot of non-fiction work.
Syntax.
Text, yes.
So,
Which I would not have found interesting in school, but I would not have found that interesting in school. I always had like a book in my lap when I was in school. Maybe even if I wasn't supposed to.
right.
All right. Anything else from anyone? Do we have any additional public comment?
We do not.
Okay. Right. And is there anybody else want to make any comments?
Any motion to adjourn?
All right, Norina,
Second.
all in favor of adjourning? Aye. Anyone opposed? We're adjourned at 6:59.
An hour.